So the minute my brain smelled that frankincense and myrrh, okay, now I know we're supposed to be ready for ritual. And I grounded and centered, and we were ready for whatever was supposed to come next. But I knew that I had to write about that connection between aromatherapy and religion,
Yeah.
between fragrance and scent triggers to figure out, tell your brain what to do, when to do it. So I just started writing. I just pounded out, 35 pages, 40 pages of a proposal. And Judica said, "This is amazing. We want to sign you right now. Let's go."
Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica Cresci. I am so excited, thrilled even, to have Amy Blackthorn here. Amy is coming out with a new book called Blackthorn's Book of Sacred Plant Magic. And just take it away, Amy. I'm just so excited to have you here. Could you introduce yourself and just tell
I
us a little bit about you?
I absolutely can. I am Amy Blackthorn. I have been teaching and working as an intuitive since 1999. I started in the Baltimore area, and now I get to teach all over the world and hang out with lovely people like you. I have a few books out. Blackthorn's Botanical Magic was the very first book. It is a book on working with essential oils in your magical practice to sort of embrace the plant spirit that we have available to us. A potions book, incense book, a little bit of everything. Blackthorn's Protection Magic has a 13,000 word escape and evasion course in it. Uh, then Blackthorn's Botanical Wellness was available to really help us understand self-care. Uh, the number one book out there for self-care wasn't made for witches, and the books that were there for witches really didn't talk about chronic illness. So I wanted to bring those two theories together and really enjoy embracing that. The most recent book is Blackthorn's Book of Sacred Plant Magic. And I'm so excited to talk more in depth about the ways that we connect with plants on a holistic level. The whole plant, the spirit of the plant. I told a friend of mine, if I go downstairs and I'm feeling a little achy and I make a cup of peppermint tea, I brew the leaves, I compost the leaves, I go and I sit with my dog and I enjoy the cup of tea. I cannot drink enough peppermint tea to damage the spirit of the peppermint plant. I'm just one person. So as long as there's one person on the plant who can identify peppermint, who can remember the taste of peppermint candies or tea, the spirit of peppermint endures. So I wanted to bring that understanding to all my friends and family.
I love that. That's so great. And one of the things that I tell my students and just talk about a lot is the importance of like connecting with the materia in spells or like, yeah, even in an herbalist way or however you're using the plants. I just think it's so important to have that like sort of animistic like layer to things because it is such a I think it's just really great to connect with plant spirits, but I also just think it's such a great technique for getting deeper and getting more out of your work with the plants. So I love that that's sort of the focus of this particular publication. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. I really wanted to make sure that people understood that it's not just something you sprinkle out of a jar. Plants are co-creators in the magic that we're working.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. Um, could you tell us a little bit about I'm curious about like two things. I'm curious about um your like religious upbringing, how like what sort of got you to where you are today in terms of your like theological background, I guess you could sort of say. And then I'm just curious as well, if there was or wasn't magic there, what were sort of the first stirrings of magic as you know it now in your life?
Growing up, our parents sent us to whatever the closest church was. They didn't really care about
Mhm.
denominations. They just wanted a place to set us for a couple hours on Sunday morning so they didn't have to deal with us. I have I have 4 sisters, and it's a lot to have underfoot. So, we went to whichever church was closest, at the once we moved into the county and we actually had a little bit of land and space to roam around, we went to an Assemblies of God church. Our parents never went with us. It was just, somebody will
Mhm.
come and pick you up and then they'll bring you back and it's fine.
That's so cool. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I love
So,
that. And this was in Baltimore?
I grew up in Baltimore City. By the time we went to the county, it was Baltimore County. But yeah,
Mhm.
Baltimore City, we went to an Episcopalian church. Um, and it was just the closest one. It was literally on the same block. So the four of us could just troop out to be at church at right in time for Sunday school and then just walk back.
Mhm.
So you see
That's so
these
cool.
this troop of little girls in frilly ankle socks just walking to church.
I love that.
But it
That's
was really
awesome.
lovely because it gave us the opportunity to really figure out what it is that we thought, how we felt about things, without our parents sitting us down and say, "Well, you have to think this, and you have to think this, and you have to think this because we say so." That never happened. Um, it was really the freedom that helped us understand this is what you want to choose, not what you're forced to choose. Um, so it wasn't until, oh goodness, I was 11. I was sharing a bedroom with my older sister Holly, who was 14 at the time. Anybody who has a younger sibling can tell you the fastest way to get them involved in your business is to tell them they're not allowed.
Yeah.
So Holly and Christine come into the house giggling and sneaking, and they're hiding behind the backpack and they're clutching it to make sure no one looks at her backpack. Literally, no one cares. Just go do whatever it is. So I wanted to be in my room, and she's nope, nope, you can't. Nope, go away. We've got stuff to do. I just figured she had some really awesome candy. I didn't I didn't care all that much. Christine goes home, we have dinner, it's time for bed, and it's still bothering me. Like, I don't know this thing. I really should know it's in my room, so obviously I should understand what's happening. Honestly, I just really thought there was Primo candy in there. So I Pink Panther out of the bed, over the edge, across the floor, and I open up her book bag one tooth at a time so she doesn't hear it, doesn't wake up. And I reach in her book bag and I peek, and it's Scott Cunningham's Wicca Guide for Solitaire Practitioner.
Mhm.
So I sneak it out of her book bag and I sneak across the room and I read it by the light of the gas station a block away, just so no one can see that I've got a flashlight or under the covers in the window. And I finished it in an hour or 2. I was absolutely entranced. I had to know everything about this. I had to know who this Scott Cunningham person was. I had to figure out all of the things. So every day after school, I'd walk to the local library and say, "Okay, what can I figure out in the 133s?" And
Mhm.
I was absolutely entranced. I had to learn everything and know everything, and this I'm gonna make this my entire personality.
That's awesome. So this was, you said you were, like, early, like, tween kind
Yeah,
of
11.
age? 11, yeah. That's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. Did you remember, like, sort of I know you said you wanted to make it your whole personality. Do you remember being like, "Okay, yes, this makes sense, like, I get this," or did it feel sort of like, "What is this, and are these people for real?" Like, how did you sort of react to it?
I had I had started with plants way before this, like 2nd and 3rd grade. I had to learn everything about plants. I had to know all the things. And so I had this idea that, when church says, well, if you need something, you pray for it. And so I had experimented with, I'd be mowing the lawn and it's a trillion degrees and it's hot and you're miserable. And I'm like, I would pray for a gust of wind to cool me off. And some wind would come by and cool me off and it would feel better. And it's like, is nature listening or is God listening? Like, who's in charge of nature?
Yeah.
And so it was something that I really wanted to figure out. So it was like when the minute I opened up Cunningham, it was like those both things converged in my brain. I'm like, oh, nature was actually listening. Um, this makes all the sense. This is what I had been thinking the whole time. So it
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
right there.
That's so cool. Oh, I love that. So it sounds like, yeah, you were you always had that connection to nature, to the plants, to a magical what's the word? Like a magical outlook on things. That's fantastic. Do you remember like did you have any encounters with spirits or ghosts or other types of entities when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was neat because it wasn't weird in our house. It wasn't something that was like it wasn't taboo.
Mm.
My mom knew who was calling on the phone before there was caller ID. Um, she, a couple minutes ahead, she'd be like, "Oh, Peep's calling. Can you get that?" And then the phone would ring. So it wasn't. I didn't know that everybody didn't have that, didn't grow up that way, until I was probably in high school. So
Mm.
that was absolutely something I took for granted. I had seen family members and I had seen um, spirits in different houses and different places, but the one that had the most impact. Oh my goodness! I was in high school. I was probably my senior year, and I'm in the kitchen doing my homework, like you do, and my grandfather appeared in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, Last I checked, he was still alive. So he shows up in his favorite flannel and jeans, looking 10 years younger and 100 pounds lighter, and saying, "Hey, I need you to tell your mom that I died. So
Wow.
sorry. Feel real bad, but I don't want her." We were going on Mondays, one day a week. And this was probably Wednesday. And so he's like, "I don't want her to wait a week to find me. That would be traumatic. Like, can you let her know that I'm sorry?"
Mm.
I go in the living room. I say, "Mom, I think something's wrong with Pop Up. Um, he may no longer be with us. Maybe you should call and check on him." She says, "Okay." So she goes to the phone and there's no answer. And I said, "I think I saw Pop Up in the kitchen." She didn't doubt me. She was just like, grief and those worrying
Mhm.
feelings. She says, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go and check on him and see what's up." I said, I can go with you. I'm here. I can handle going to do things." "No, no, no. You stay and do your homework. It's probably nothing." And she drove the half an hour to Aberdeen and gets there. He's not answering the door. She's got her own keys. We were going there once a week. And he had fallen and hit his head and he could not get back up.
Mm.
So she was very, grief is its own thing, but it was so important that she never doubted me for a minute. Like, this isn't, you made something up. A lot of parents would have said, "Oh, stop being dramatic," or no, she just took it in stride and said she'd handle her business. Um, she had talked about seeing her Uncle Al when she was, about my age. He had come to her as a spirit. So she never doubted me for a minute, and that was so important for my development as an adult, but also as a
Mm.
witch and a intuitive.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a really powerful story. That's when you see spirits, and maybe it's changed, but what is kind of the experience of that? I feel like for me, it's definitely changed over time of like how they come into view or how they communicate with me, and I'm just kind of curious on that for you.
Absolutely. I've been seeing clients who were looking for connections with their loved ones. I don't see them in my eyeballs. I see them in my brain.
Mhm.
Um, I have friends who do see them with their eyes, but it's not the way that they appear to me. But it was so important that as time progressed, they got more solid,
Mm.
as we've worked together and tried to understand each other's messages. That they're no longer sort of a misty outline in my head. They're fully fleshed people with specific outfits and shoes. I
Mm.
was in high school and we were driving down the street that we lived on, and we had driven up and down this street during the day, during the night. We had lived there for years, and I saw a guy jogging on our street, And I'm like, oh, that's dangerous. He should, there's no shoulder for him to jog on. He could get hurt. And then I realized that he looked like somebody from Three's Company. He had the 70s shiny satin shorts with the blue with the white piping, and he's got a headband and a big floofy hairdo. And I realized that, yeah, he's no longer with us. He was killed in this spot, and he's just sort of going on a loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yes. That is like such a funny image though. I love that. Obsessed. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Like I have a lot of like out of the corner of my eye kind of situations
Oh yeah.
where I can, and then it's almost like my brain, like my psychic brain, my mind's eye fills in the rest of the information for me. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was this cousin. And it's sort of like that plus the feeling of who they are, of who's in the room with me, of everything. I really resonate with the term download because I do feel like it downloads. And if there's, a part of the file that's a little fuzzy or whatever, it's like the full picture download makes it very clear to me like what the situation is and who's
Yes.
here. Yeah.
I live
That's so
really close to I-95, and it stretches from Maine to Florida, so it's a big thoroughfare. And I was driving through there probably a year ago, and the traffic is really slow in that spot. It's Everyone's going to New Jersey to go to the beaches, and I see a lady in traffic, blonde, like a purple shirt, and a pair of jeans, and I'm like, she's gonna nope, nope, she's a person without a body, not a person with a body.
I love that. Like mental distinction, like every all the psychic witches are like, "Oh, yes, that's actually not they're no longer with us." I love that. I know in your book you talk like especially I loved the introduction. I thought it was such a funny story. And you talked about, how you were reading tarot in a shop. How did you I know we're kind of like skipping forward, but I am curious how your divination abilities and how you sort of like recognize like, ooh, like this is something I like doing, this is something I'm good at doing. How did you sort of yeah, develop in your divination skills and then wind up like a professional reader?
So when I turned 18, the first thing I did was run out and join the first coven I could find. Never do that. Like date around a bit. But in my head, they're the only coven that exists because I found them. I'm like, my love, it's Baltimore. There's a million covens. So it didn't occur to me. I ran out and I joined the first coven I could find. There was some open rituals. I'm like, these people seem pretty cool. I'm gonna hang out with them. They were in a shop at that point. It was called Bell Book and Candle in Baltimore City. There was a Bell Book and Candle in Delaware. Packages all the time getting crossed. But Denise required any of the readers who were coming in, as she knew I had been reading forever. She wanted that I wanted to really dive in and become one of the readers for the shop. But she required 30 hours of mentored practice before you could start charging for readings. So I had to come in and pretend like I was a reader, just like a tattoo apprenticeship,
Mm,
and read for clients. I couldn't charge them because I didn't have the required hours. And I actually got the mentorship saying, okay, this is not only what the cards mean, but things like how to talk to your clients, what are rules of decorum, how can you really approach this and be as kind and understanding as you would want to be if you were on the other side of the table.
mhm,
So I went through the practice, and I was so excited to go start working, and then the shop wound up closing.
mm,
Okay, well, now I need to figure out how to do this myself. And so I was teaching through the coven and writing classes, and it had to be, 2 hours long. And here's whatever you'd like to start teaching about. And so they really developed alongside of each other because of my coven experience. By the time I got to Mystical Voyage, I had been reading for 8 years. Uh, it was such a beautiful place. When it first opened, it was just one little slot in a strip mall. And
Mhm.
so it was very small. She had one large kitchen table in the middle of everything for the readings. And I was like, oh, there's no privacy. There's no way for you to like talk about really in-depth, sensitive subjects. How am I going to do this? And my first reading is a woman named Michelle. She's a comedian, Michelle Wojciechowski, and she sits down at the table. Her husband's with her. She wants to read. She wants to figure out what's going on. And so I pull out my Brian Froud fairy deck and I start talking about these really important finicky details, and I'm getting a lot of hits and I really feel like I'm going, and I stop and look up and I go, does that make sense? Like I want to make sure that she realizes that I realize there's another person on the side of the table. And she says, no, no, no. And I said, well, you're an accountant, right? And her husband starts laughing because he is an accountant, and everything I just said laid out his entire work experience and everything that's going on in his office. But I got him instead of her.
Mhm.
Like, okay,
Classic.
I definitely need a separate space, one person at a time. Let's do this. And so it was absolutely a great training moment because up until then I had just been making sure I had one-on-one time with my clients. I hadn't
Mhm.
had somebody else wander into the room and have the reading be about them.
I love that. That's awesome. I used to read, I live in Salem, Massachusetts,
Mhm,
and, I used to read at a shop in Salem, and it was kind of a similar thing where, like, very small shop, a lot of people in October, there's people, like, wrapped around the building, there's people trying to get in, the streets are packed, and the table was, like, right in the front, like, right next to the front door, basically, and I was just the whole time I was just I kept, like, getting wandering messages. There was another table in the back, and I
mhm.
preferred reading there because it was, like, yeah, it was quieter, and I felt like the readings were clearer, like you were kind of saying, because there were just people that would wander in right next to me, and I'd be like, "I feel like I'm getting a lot of energy right now, and it's not for the client that's sitting across from me at the table," but
Well,
that's
I
awesome.
am the keynote speaker for Temple Fest Labor Day weekend, so I will be in Salem over that weekend. I will definitely be in town.
Oh, that's awesome. I've been meaning to get over to, like, the Temple of Witchcraft events. They sound really cool. I haven't actually been to any.
They had me last year as a featured presenter, and I had such a great time. It's a nice it looks like a community college campus in the woods. It's a nice small campus. There's a nice enough space for everybody to get together and uh, have meals and have some fellowship. And there's little separate buildings so everyone can go and do their own things. It was really a great experience.
That's awesome. That's I'll have to ooh, well, I'm so excited. I'll have to get over there. So you said you joined the first coven that you found when you were 18, which is I love that too. That's so funny. How did Yeah, like, how did that change over time? How did your because I've never been a part of a magical tradition, so I'm
Mhm.
always really curious. I've always been like a solitary witch. I have tons of people I know who are in traditions, but I just never been drawn to a tradition in particular. So how did that part of your practice sort of evolve over time?
It was really neat because the tradition that it was a part of was founded by Silver Ravenwolf.
Mm,
So the Black Forest clan, Denise, my high priestess, Lady Scheherazade, was initiated and trained, and she went through the whole deal. So we were going and having open rituals, full moons, occasional uh, Sabbats, but then there was the closed practice stuff that we had to figure out. Once a month, you're going to go into Bell Book and Candle and say, okay, we're going to learn how to do, how to set your altar. We're going to learn how to each individual quarter call. Here's some lessons. So it was very, very structured. Like you got a giant binder full of material saying, okay, we're going to learn all this material. So it gave me the really great structure of understanding and moving forward as a yeah, I'm a double Virgo. Like I want the lists. I want the list of the
yeah.
list, and then I'm going to check off all the things on that list. So it wasn't this nebulous, oh, I guess we're going to talk about the gods today. It was very structured, and it gave me that really intense responsibility to saying, okay, I need to have my scholastic understanding. I need to be able to prove my source material. And it made for a great introduction to just writing classes that later turned into books.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, I love that. I love this information, by the way, that you're a double Virgo. That's so great. It makes so much sense. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, with with the plants, with the writing, I feel like you're such like obviously Virgo, Mercury, writing, all of that kind of stuff, and I just feel like it's such a part of you. Like I just feel like you're such a prolific writer, and it's just so fascinating. I'm curious about that too. Like, when did you start writing about the craft? Like, I feel like, I don't know, like, when did you have this moment with yourself? And what did this moment even look like where you're like, I have something to teach, like I have something to share, or I want this written in this particular way? Like, what was that experience like when you first started writing books?
I had got a diary in kindergarten. My mother was
Mhm.
like, "Here, you need to write down your feelings and put it in this book, and here you go." Absolutely not. I knew I wanted a book with my name on it since before I could write my name. So I started writing my stories in this diary. I'm like, if you're going to read this, you're going to read some stories. I'm keeping my material to myself. So
Mhm.
I knew the whole time that I wanted to write books. And I found my 8th grade yearbook, and they're like, "Where will you be in 20 years?" I'm like, "I am going to be a best-selling author. I'm going to be an award-winning author. Like, this is what I'm going to do." So it wasn't until, oh goodness, 2005 maybe, I proposed an Ask Phoebe uh, sort of advice column in a witchy magazine saying, "Hey, how can I help new practitioners figure out what they're doing? I'm gonna have an advice column for witches."
Mhm.
So it appeared in every edition of Thorn magazine, and I had a great time, and I really loved getting into there to try and figure out how to help people. But one of my dear friends would actually see and read my column was Judika Isles, the author of the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, who is now my editor.
Wow.
In December of 2015, my friend Natalie Zaman, who is the co-author of Social Media Spellbook, yay! That comes out August 20th. Um, Natalie and I drove to the Bronx to a second floor walk-up shop owned by Lady Rhea. We were going to go see
Mhm.
Judica in a class that Judica was doing on the Witches of Yule. So we're going. This is a great adventure. So I drive 2 hours to Natalie. We jump in Natalie's truck. She drives 2 hours to the Bronx, and we're doing it. We're making a whole day of it. So we walk in, and Lady Rhea hands you a glass of prosecco and tells you to make yourself at home in her living room, and it was the best thing ever. So Judica shows up with 30 tons of books. Her son's carrying a giant duffel bag full of the you've seen it 5,000 spells. It's 4 inches thick and it weighs 10 pounds. Uh, and during the intermission, she comes over to see Natalie and I, and she says, "Hey, Amy, I love your column. I love your writing style." That's Millie. Uh,
Doggy.
why aren't you writing for us? And I'm like, who is us? What, I missed a memo here somewhere. Like there's an off track that I missed. She says, no, I'm a procurement editor for Wiser now. And I would really love to see you write for Wiser. Are you working on anything? And so I elevator pitched her 5 books, and she's like, oh, send me that one. So those of you playing the home game, uh, books are sold on the proposal. It's not, you don't have to have a book ready to hand someone. You're writing the proposal. So
Mhm.
who are you? What do you want to write? Why should we let you write it? All those little details, and then 2 or 3 sample chapters, so they can really get to understand your voice as a writer. And so it took me a year of fighting the imposter syndrome. Like, how can I write a book? Who's going to listen to me? Why is this a thing? For me to actually put this proposal together and say, what is it that we're really doing here? Uh, it wasn't until I had a family funeral to go to. It was, one of those great aunts that nobody's ever met, and it's a family obligation. And so we had to go back to the neighborhood where I grew up in Baltimore City to the Catholic church where my mother went to as a child. And there's my aunt who's fussing about their Calvary Baptist. So they're going to bring out the cavalry and shoot me because I'm a witch. Uh, I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I'm sort of fidgeting. My mom's not there. Got my safety person not
Mhm.
here. So the back door's open and the procession starts. They've got the incense and the candles and the flags and the priests and the casket, and they're wheeling everything to the front of the room. And all of a sudden, I'm fine. Like, fine, fine. Everything's cool. I'm ready for ritual. My brain is online. And it took me a couple seconds to figure out what was happening. And my brain said, oh, hey, um, that's what it is. Denise, my first high priestess, was a recovering Catholic. So the beginning of every ritual, she would smoke out the entire ritual room so thick you could not see 6 feet across the ritual circle to the person over across with frankincense and myrrh. So the minute my brain smelled that frankincense and myrrh, okay, now I know we're supposed to be ready for ritual. And I grounded and centered, and we were ready for whatever was supposed to come next. But I knew that I had to write about that connection between aromatherapy and religion,
Yeah.
between fragrance and um, scent triggers to figure out, tell your brain what to do, when to do it. So I just started writing. I just pounded out, 35 pages, 40 pages of a proposal. And Judica said, this is amazing. We want to sign you right now. Let's go.
That's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. So wonderful. I also just like love I don't know if there's a story around this, and I guess you kind of already said it where like you wanted a book with your name on it from the time you were a little kid. But is that sort of why like all of your books are it's like Blackthorn's X, Y, and Z or this or something like that? I love that format. I think it's like so cool. I love it. What is there like a story around that, or did that like when did that get proposed?
It's funny because the original contract said Encyclopedia of Magical Aromatherapy. Like, it didn't really have a really great, fabulous title. But once they saw my narrative style, they saw, I want to tell stories and I want to give people context for the things that I'm teaching, because the context, as a neurodivergent person, everything is context. You have to explain it or it doesn't exist. And so they're like, these are your stories. This is that part of yourself that you're sharing. It's not just white is this and black is this and green is this. It's about the stories that you have and the stories that you share. So they came back with, okay, this is your story. This is Blackthorn's botanical magic. So I was
Amazing.
really super honored and excited that they understood the stories that I wanted to tell and how important that was to the magic that we're learning. That
Yeah.
the minute Blackthorn's botanical brews came out, I'm like, oh look, it's a pattern. we have
Yeah.
the thing.
Yes, you found the thing. I love it. I just think it's so fabulous. I'm obsessed. Um so yeah, let's talk about plants because that's what's all, like so much of your work is about, and that's obviously this upcoming book is Blackthorn's Book of Sacred Plant Magic. So you talk a lot in the book about plant spirits and like the importance of connecting to the plant spirit for maybe people listening who maybe have never considered that plants have a spirit or have never really like come across the idea of like working with a plant ally. Could you kind of like describe that and why you find it so sort of important in a magical practice or working with herbs in general?
Of course. When botanical magic first came out, the first thing people would come up and they'd shake my hand and they'd say, "Oh, my name is Susie so and so. I really like your work, but I can't be a green witch because I kill all my plants."
Mm.
My love, that's not a thing. You do not have to grow all your own plants to work with plant spirits, to work with essential oils. You don't have to grow your own plant materials to understand and practice and be aligned with the plant spirits that are around you. Do you cook? Well, yeah. All of the spices in your spice cabinet were once living plants. I promise that you have some sort of connection if you have a daily practice. If you're making coffee in the morning, you have a connection to the plant spirit of coffee. If you make tea, if you cook, if you lean under a tree waiting for a cab in the morning, like, you have a relation with a plant spirit. You just don't know it yet. It was so important to really give people permission to experience and understand their daily life through the lens of plants, because they were absolutely convinced that the only thing that counted was if you had a giant apothecary with 30 different glass jars all labeled with their scientific name, like then it didn't count. And
Mhm.
it's that's not the case at all. I really wanted to make sure that people had the opportunity to really connect with individual plants, with plant spirits, with anything that gave them the agency to embrace their magic.
Mhm.
Agency and consent are I want to tattoo it on my forehead. It's so important.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the way that I approach magic is that magic is agency. It's the ability to say, this is a particular set of circumstances that I'm dealing with, and that's no longer serving me. I'm going to change them. And so giving people the agency to really dig deep and find ways of connecting with plant spirits in and around their daily lives is super important. Um, I every full moon I go around the property, make sure everybody's playing nicely, words are set, and everything is good to go. So this was probably 10 years ago now. I'm walking around, I'm making sure everything's where it's supposed to be, and a stand of poke appears overnight. Those of you who aren't familiar, poke is a very fleshy purple and green plant that gets these great big bundles of purple berries on it. And everybody's mother hollers out the window, "Don't touch those, they're poison." If a plant is poisonous, it's trying to protect itself. If it can protect
Mhm.
itself, it can protect you. So we look at a lot of our protection plants as things with thorns, spines, poison, etc. So very potent protection allies. It's in the backyard of my home and it's just appeared overnight. So what is behind me that I need protection from that I can't see?
Mm.
So I really have to go through my life day to day and pick out where could this danger possibly be coming from, because obviously I hadn't noticed it until now. So I look and I figure and I look. At that time, I was the head of security for two high rises in Wilmington, Delaware. So I had some things to look at, and it turned out that I had a stalker from work. This was a very, very dangerous person who had been stalking me for a couple months. And I
Mm.
firmly believe that if Poke hadn't let me know that something was up, that I would not be alive today.
Wow.
That connection with the plants, that looking around the plants in my own space, their proximity to my home, the number of them, all of those had a very important piece of the message for me. But if I hadn't been looking, it wouldn't have gotten through. And I don't think that I would be here today.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That is like there's so oh my gosh, there's like so much about that story that I just think is so fascinating. I've never like even considered like using plants in that way
Mhm.
for like a divinatory aid. That's so fascinating. Oh my gosh. I love that.
There's a lot about that. There's a whole chapter in the back of Blackthorn's Botanical Magic that'll tell you how and why and where to figure that stuff
Mm.
out.
Yay. Okay. I'm like, oh, I gotta start flipping the pages. Oh my gosh. Wow. That is fascinating. That is so cool. Yeah. I think that that's one of my favorite thing. I always say about myself, like a couple years ago, I was like, I don't work with plants. I'm not a plant witch. I'm not interested in the herbs. Like, no. And it came from this like fear that I had about like I don't know why. I was just like worried about working with plants because I felt like they were just so powerful almost. And I'm like, I don't want to disrespect them. I don't want to accidentally use the wrong one. I don't want to like accidentally poison myself or something. Like I don't know what it was, but I was just so worried about using plants. And then I think year after year, I feel myself being very pulled towards the plants and also like information just starts to come into my life that I don't necessarily I don't seek it out, but I feel like I've gotten this herbal education in the last couple of years just from the plants. Like I feel like that's the only way to describe it because I'm like I'm not looking for this information, it's just coming to me. And now I'm like probably still sort of somewhere in the beginning phases of my like plant witchcraft journey, but I love plants and I almost like I can't even imagine what I was doing with my practice when I didn't use plants. I some people don't use them and that's fine. But I was just like, so what was I doing? Like, what was I using? Like, what was going on? Because they are just so wonderful. And I just think that, yeah, I needed to almost be ready for them
Do you work with
to come into
Angelica?
my life. Yes, of
Okay.
course.
I was going to break my heart if you did, if you were like, no.
I do. Oh my gosh, I love Angelica roots. I had the Professor Charles Porterfield a couple of years ago, and he wears like this big Angelica root bracelet, like just a big root on his like wrist. And I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "It's Angelica root. You should use it." And so since then, I have multiple like large pieces of Angelica root that I wear on my person, like a sort of a la Charles Porterfield. And yeah, I was at the airport once, and I just had a big like hunk of Angelica root around my neck. It smells like celery, and I'm just in the airport, and I'm like, why is all I smell is celery? And I was just luckily like I went through TSA just fine with it, but I was like worried that the Angelica root was gonna tick off everybody and I was gonna have to take it off. But yeah, I love Angelica root.
There's a really, I think it's beautiful, but I wrote the recipe. There's a really beautiful section in Botanical Magic on Angelica, but there's a recipe for a grief oil because Angelica
Mm.
is so grounding and amazing for grief that I have friends in mortuary sciences who use it for anointing the dead for those
Mm.
the family, help them release the grief and help the spirit of the person whose remains have been left behind. And it was really incredible for some of the people that I've worked with. They're like, look, this is super important. And so if you work with Angelica, I would love to see your opinion on this oil.
Oh yes, I'm definitely gonna have to check it out. Well, I do a lot of work as well with the chthonic deities. That's like my primary, like all of my deities have some type of chthonic epithet. It's like kind of funny. I'm kind of out here like, does anyone that doesn't have a chthonic epithet want to work with me? 'Cause I feel like there's just a lot of depth. I love it though. I love it. So yeah, I think I very much resonate with I think Angelica root just because of my name. But yeah, like I been getting more into the sort of the baneful plants, I think sort of through the chthonic gods. And yeah, that's ancestral plants. My family's from Italy, so trying to work with a lot of Mediterranean herbs. I just started like figuring out what certain herbs like look like and like
Mhm.
identifying them in the wild, like that's mugwort or oh that's yarrow or whatever. And I'm feeling a little like I'm feeling like my thumb has gotten significantly greener in the last couple of years. And
Yes.
it's because the plants are like just showing up in my life. It's like so fascinating.
It's the number that really jumps out at me. Like this year, I was just out in my yard and I noticed Lobelia inflata has been creeping closer and closer to the house in bigger and bigger numbers. It's also called pukeweed. So when we do weed walks, I'll lead a walk and we have each individual student grab one leaf, chew it up. It helps communicate with the plant spirits. And we're like,
Mhm.
okay, this one's magical, this one's poisonous, this one's medicinal, and we just go through and everybody picks plants to really sort of understand and get to know what are we doing, what how do we go. But the fact that all of this lobelia is sort of congregating in mass towards the house, it's like okay, more people are looking for that communication, more people are looking for that
Mhm.
connection, and it's so important for people to realize that the plants that we encounter on a daily basis are looking to work with us. You know, that craggy dandelion that's growing up in between the cracks in the sidewalk, like it has a job. It wants to let you know what's happening. There's
Mhm.
definitely something happening in your ecosystem, whether that's in the physical, like the dandelion is bringing up nitrogen and trying to bring some of that to the surface, or it's magical, saying, okay, like let's really look at how big the net is that you're casting and what can we do with the energy that you're working with right now. If you're casting your net too wide, maybe you're spreading yourself a little too thin.
Mhm. I love that. That's so cool. So, so cool. What would you say for folks who maybe feel like they are disconnected from plants in some way? Maybe they live in like a big city. Maybe they just were like me and they were like, for whatever reason, not interested in working with plants. Like, what would you say to sort of get them to start getting connected with the plant allies?
It's really it's easier than we think it is. We want it to be this super complicated thing, and it's so easy that people think that they're doing it wrong because it's so very easy. You can look at the foods that you're eating, things that you're really craving. If I'm looking for spicy, amazing, flavorful food, maybe you're looking for some protection aspect of your practice. It doesn't have to be food that you make. You can just listening to your body and saying, "Oh, I'm really craving this spicy curry soup that I love. That's fiery and it's passionate. Are you looking for romantic entanglements, or are you looking for protection magic?" You can look at the perfumes that you're choosing or the colognes that you're wearing. The smells that we're attracted to have the same understanding. If you're looking for resinous and deep fragrances, maybe you're looking for a little bit of grounding in your life. If you're looking for some frankincense perfume that just tickles the edges of your nose with a little bit of really good frankincense, has a lemon undernote to it. So maybe you're looking for a spiritual connection. I really like amber. So maybe the connection that I'm looking for is a protective aspect that really nurtures who I am on the inside. Um, each of those things that we're looking at has a purpose, but it can tell a lot about our magical health by what we're drawn to. I was I was working in a greenhouse for a number of years, and I had this plant that I was obsessed with. The fragrance was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen or smelled. Had little teeny pink trumpet flowers, and I was entranced. Like, okay, so in a minute I got a house, I had some land, I was going to put something in it. I went looking for this plant, and so I go to the greenhouses and I go to the landscaping places, and I'm looking for this beautiful plant. It had been long enough I couldn't remember what the name of it was, so I couldn't even ask for it by name. And I finally find it, and I smell it, and it's beautiful. And it's so pretty that it makes the hair on my arms stand up. It's perfect. The problem with that is, in landscaping we look at the Latin name, and in magic we look at the common name. So I hadn't put two and two together yet. I went back and looked at the tag, and I said, "Son of a biscuit, it's devil's shoestring." It's going to protect my house because it's going to protect my house.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, I love that. That's so cool. What is your I almost like, what is your plan? I'm like, okay, what a question. Like what I'm just curious, do you have like a specific plant ally that sort of has been with you for a while, or you sort of are like, that's the one that I reach for, or something that comes to mind of a close connection?
Yes, every year, a lot of people think, oh, they're going to make New Year's resolutions and they're going to do this. I pick a plant to work with for that entire calendar year. So
Mm.
in 2020, the calendar year, I didn't know what was coming. My plant for 2020 was mugwort.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It
Awesome.
was absolutely intense as a year goes. So every year I pick a different plant to work with, um, and it really winds up. It's twofold. It informs of what I'm doing, and it helps me deal with whatever's coming. So it's a little bit of divination. It's a little bit of understanding, and each of those pieces comes together really well. Like one year it was frankincense. One year it was dragon's blood, and it's really been a potent tool to make sure that I'm getting everything that I need from that year.
Hmm. I love that. I love this plant divination like thing. It's just it makes so much sense to me. I'm shocked that like I'm like, wow, like it's all like filtering into my brain. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. Like I love it. I love the whole scheme of it. I think for me, like my biggest thing that started getting me really more interested in plants was the sort of folklore connections, the mythological connections, realizing that at the crux of every like I work with primarily with the Greek pantheon. I'm like at the crux of every Greek myth, there's like a major herb or flower or fruit or something. Like I can't even think of one that there's not like an herb that just pops up or a tree or something. And I started realizing how deeply connected it was. Yeah. Do you yeah, like, do you work with sort of the sort of folkloric perspectives, or is it more like just your connections with the plant allies themselves?
I always make sure to do my research because every they deserve the respect of their history.
Mm,
So there's in botanical magic, I tell the story of how Daphne and Apollo came together to create Bay,
yeah.
and so we start there, and we get to have the handshake introductions of, hey, this is I know this is where you started. This is a lot about your history. Now, what else can we learn from each other? What can I do while we're working together? How can I honor you? Um, am I burning bay leaves in my ritual space? What can I offer you for our partnership? So it's always the first step because I want to sort of get to know the personality of the plant that I'm approaching for that spirit
Mhm.
work. But it's always the first step because I really feel that it's respectful to make
Yeah.
sure that we start with the history and the folklore of that individual plant.
Yeah,
The
it's like the cosmology of the
Yes, yes,
plant.
absolutely.
I love that.
So in both botanical magic and the Blackthorn's Book of Sacred Plant Magic, I start with the story of that plant and really get to know who they are as a person before we move forward with. Now let's ask something from them.
Mhm.
People say, "Oh well, I'm going to reach out to X god for tarot." Okay, but do you have a relationship with them? It's the difference between going to your neighbor who is Catholic to talk about the neighborhood HOA or going to the Pope for the neighborhood HOA. Then your neighborhood plant allies are going to have more information for you and have more time and availability for you than just automatically going to the head of that particular family. There's a
Yeah.
section in Sacred Plant Magic where we talk about botanical families. Who's related to whom and how can we work with that. Say you're allergic to apples, your mouth goes numb, it's super bad. We want to make sure that you're safe. You can approach any other member of the rose family for something along those same lines. Uh,
Mhm.
Apples, plums, pears, lo- those are all part of that rose family. So we can find someone else in the rose family to have those conversations with that aren't going to impact you negatively. You can meet the plant spirit of peanut in your inner landscape without
Yeah.
actually interacting with any particles of peanut that could send you into anaphylaxis and learn what is it that I'm supposed to learn from having an allergy to peanut. There may not be a lesson, but there may be some sort of relationship that you're working together to create. But once we get to the idea that you don't have to have the physical plant material to connect with them, you can work with plants outside your biome, outside your continent, outside your epic. You can connect with plants that have been extinct for 1,000 years. As long as somebody still knows what it is and can identify it, that egregor, that thought form of that spirit is still going to exist. And we see
Mhm.
this in practice every day. There are, oh goodness, pineberry seeds. You can go to Lowe's or Home Depot right now and buy pineberry plants. Those plants were derived from seeds that were found in canopic jars for 3,000 years. They were able to germinate them and bring them back into practice every day. So you see them in the landscaping. They look like white strawberries with bright red seeds. And you think, okay, this is just a regular strawberry. It's not. It's the ancestor of the strawberry that we know today. It doesn't taste like strawberries at all. It actually tastes closer to pineapple.
Wow.
It's got this really stringent flavor that's gorgeous, but it's not what you expect strawberry to be. But it was extinct for thousands of years, and we brought it back.
Oh my goodness. That is so cool. Wow. I'm like obsessed. And I love this idea that like you can work with the yeah, like the spirit sort of, because I've always thought about it more as like that makes so much sense to me because I'm always like, oh yeah, I'm working like you say in your book, like making a cup of peppermint tea and connecting with the plant. I like peppermint. And it's like this, that makes sense. But I'm a chaos witch, so I'm like loving the idea that I'm like me and this like distant plant can just like have a little chat. Like that is so my paradigm. That's like what I'm all about. So that's so
Yes. There's a plant that was so popular that they sacrificed the very last plant in known existence to Nero, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna nom 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 and eat it." It was aphrodisiac. It was an abortifacient. It made sex more pleasurable. It stimulated your appetite. Like it did. It was so incredible that they ate all of it. It was so important that it was on the money in modern day Libya.
Mm,
Perfect. And they found it in 2020, 150 miles from the last place it was seen 2,000 years ago.
oh my
It's
gosh.
come back. So these plants are finding ways to return to us.
Oh, I feel like I could be here for 5 hours talking to you about plants.
Yes,
Maybe we should do that sometime.
1,000%.
Yes, I am like obsessed. But yeah, if anybody else wants to be part of this conversation, read Blackthorn's Book of Sacred Plant Magic and all your other amazing publications. You also said there was another book coming out this year.
Yes, I have 2 books coming out in the
Okay,
same
what's the
10-day
other
span.
one?
So, Social Media Magic is a social media spell book, 366 ways to get witchy on the web. So it's 366 spells you can open up to whichever day of the week. And I really love the idea of this because it's great for beginners, it's great for advanced practitioners, but it's also as a witchy business owner, it's a year's worth of prompts to help your social media posting. So you have an idea of what to post because my goodness, it's exhausting to try and think of a new thing and a new thing every day of the week. So
Mm,
they each have individual icons of what they are for. So if they're a photo post, or if you want a platform that's geared towards videos, this is a great post to do today. But it's the spell work that we're finding a connection to because every set of eyes that lands on the magic that you're producing is more energy in the piggy bank to spend on that spell later. We're
mhm.
increasing the magic output by increasing the number of eyes on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, I definitely need that one too as a magical social media person and all of that. That's so sick. Oh, yes. Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate like all the wisdom that you've bestowed upon us. So honored to have you here. All your links, everything is going to be in the show notes. We're going to
Perfect.
put your book links down there and everything so people can easily find them. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. I would love to hang out sometime.
Yes. Yeah, well, maybe we can have like a little Salem meetup. That's what I always say whenever everyone comes to town. I'm like, yeah, I'll show you around. And we can go to get some coffee. It's so fun.
Sounds like a plan.
Amazing. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Have a lovely rest of your day or night. Bye.